So we have election security and voter rights. Which one do you want? If you want both, you're on my side. And I think I have a solution that can make everyone happy. So on one side, you have people saying that they want elections to be more secure and they're going to do that. On the other side, you have people saying the first side is just trying to curtail voting rights and they don't want them to do that. Well, let's go to the second side first. They're saying that basically we don't need to make elections more secure, and this is just an attempt to take away people's voting rights. So what I would want to say to someone like that is, do you not want secure elections? In which case they probably get super defensive and argue with me and assume I'm on the other side. But assuming they didn't and they gave me an earnest answer, I think that they would say yes. But they would argue that no one is trying to breach the election system, and there's just simply nothing out there suggesting that's the case. But that's actually a little bit of a fallacy there, in that it's a fallacy we've made a lot in the past in this country, which is because no one is trying to breach something, therefore it doesn't make any sense to spend time and money to secure it. We actually had this with computing, and as a result, we have a lot of problems because we didn't build things in a secure way, because we were just thinking, who's going to do that, right? Who's going to try to mess the computer up? It's this little thing that I'm making, right? Well, it turned out to be something that we really should have kept more secure, and it was a mistake. So I would argue the same can be applied to elections. Just because no one's currently trying to mess the system up doesn't mean it couldn't happen in the future. It's not a good reason to not make it secure. Now, on the other side, the problem that they have is they're mostly thinking that security can be accomplished with restriction. And that's not a very good way to accomplish security, and I'll tell you why. Because the people, the bad guys basically, in cybersecurity, their goal is to disrupt and hinder. And if your response to that is to disrupt yourself and hinder yourself, make your own system worse, well, you sort of just did their job for them, didn't you? And yes, it's true, I do agree that there are some that are trying to make it more difficult to vote in ways that would make it harder for their opponents to vote against them. Now, there are several reasons behind this. One is that you need money to get an ID, and that's a big thing they're arguing for, is that you need to have some kind of ID in order to vote. Now, this is sort of logical, and it's a good start for a secure system, is make it to where people have to present ID to vote. The problem with this is you're introducing a paywall into voting, which I think sort of goes against the idea of voting, that you have to pay to do it. So that's not great either. So what is my middle ground exactly? Well, you do require IDs, but you do make them free and easy to obtain. And we could do that today. Now, I want to say this first. I am not saying that we should do digital voting. That's a bad idea for a number of reasons, but the biggest one is that deciding if an election was fair now couldn't be done by more normal people. You'd have to have technical people on both sides that are one biased to one side, one biased to the other, actually looking at very complicated stuff to actually decide if something was fair. That is not good. We want to keep that simple so that if such a thing happens where there's some kind of contestation of the election, it can be handled by normal people. Beyond that, though, we can digitize a lot of this stuff. So the first thing, making IDs free, that's not too bad. The cost of doing something like that, especially for a simple specialized ID, really wouldn't be too hard to do. Beyond that, we could digitize this stuff, which I know sounds like it opens it up to being less secure, but there are ways that we could do it that would work well. So you might be thinking, well, how are we going to keep a system like that secure? How are we going to keep people from gaming it? Well, the thing is, you don't actually have to completely stop somebody from breaching a system like this. You just have to make it where it wouldn't scale well, meaning that if one person puts in a ton of effort to get one fraudulent vote, that damage is not much, right? And the likelihood they're going to go through all that for that little of a reward is very low. So this is what I call risk management, or we call risk management, which is we're looking at what's the damage that can be done with the risk that comes with that. And we're judging the probability that that could happen, and then the cost to preventing it. Now, a lot better way of dealing with this is not to totally prevent fraud, but to make the fraud to where it's not scalable. Meaning, I might be able to work really hard and vote fraudulently one time, but I couldn't do it 1,000 times. I couldn't vote 1,000 times doing that. So there's a lot of ways we can do that. I want to start with how I'm suggesting making this super accessible. And that would actually be to have an application, an app that can be installed on your phone and get an ID through that. All phones have cameras, and you could take your picture that way. You can send your birth certificate that way, or whatever proof of citizenship, your social security card. And the computer would mostly just trust that it is what you say it is, maybe doing a few checks that it would be able to tell a picture of a dog is not a birth certificate. And if there's anything that seems a little amiss from that analysis of the image, then it does get reviewed by a person, else it just, moves on. And beyond that, well, what if somebody tried to do this where they just use themselves 1,000 times at 1,000 different addresses? Well, that's where you could use things like facial recognition. You would run these algorithms just continuously on these databases and look for patterns where you're seeing, hey, it seems like this person is appearing in multiple places. And we know this is possible. You've even seen Facebook do this, where it can recognize you in a picture it hadn't seen you in yet. So we do checks like that, and we also run metrics, like we know the address that you're in, and if we have 1,000 people in our database on your same address, we know there's a problem. And there are just so many metrics that you can do that will raise these alerts, and that's when a person gets involved. That way, could you get one person trying to say there are 2 people at one address? Yeah, you might have that happen, but there are a few ways that it could be prevented. If you tried to do 10 people at that address, you could have an algorithm say, okay, this is a 2-bedroom house and there's 10 people living here. We need to have a human review this for accuracy. And that lowers the workload of people actually working on this system while keeping it rather secure. It's not impenetrable, but it can't be penetrated in a way that scales. Now you have a way that most things are automated, they don't cost much. Most people would be able to get this voter ID, and of course I'm saying that you could still go get the ID in person, and you could do it at the public library, would be another suggestion. You could have this ID mailed to you at your address, you could go pick it up somewhere, or maybe even have it sent to the public library where you did it. Because we have public libraries with computers that usually have webcams, and that's really all you would need. And they have scanners there too. We have the technology that you can scan something with your phone's camera, and it's not hard to do. I've done it several times before. So we have technology to actually satisfy both sides of this, where yes, you need an ID, no, it doesn't cost any money, yes, you can do it on your phone, it would actually be easier than getting an ID today. So everybody's happy here. And I think this is a solution that I'm willing to push a little bit. But I also think it's a solution that a lot of other people aren't going to want to pay attention to because they don't really want a solution, they just want to be mad. Okay guys, I hope you liked this video. If you did, give me a like and subscribe to this channel. I am getting close to 1,000 subscribers and I could really use it. Have a good night.